The chapel aboard the Golden Remembrance smelled like oil and sweat, and the good strong incense that made Mogg's head feel floaty. He kissed the worn pict of the Emperor one more time, counting the kisses on his thick fingers. 10 kisses for luck, same as always. The Emperor's face in the pict was all blurry now from so many kiss touches, but Mogg knew he could still see through the smudges. The pict was old, older than Mogg's time in the Guard, given to him by the mining boss back home who said the Emperor watched over us all, especially the simple ones, because they did their work without asking why questions that made thinking hurt. "Mogg, you great lump, stop snogging that pict and check your kit," Sergeant Lecken called out. But his voice had the not really angry sound that meant he was doing his own before-fight rituals. Lecken always checked his knife 3 times, touched the scar on his jaw, then spat over his left shoulder. Everyone had their ways of asking the Emperor to keep them alive through another fight. Mogg carefully folded the pict into the special pocket over his heart, beating strong and ready, the way Ogryn hearts did when battle was coming, and turned to his ripper gun. "Hello, meat chunks," he whispered to the weapon, running one massive finger along its barrel. The metal was cold, but good cold, the kind that meant it was ready to make enemies into not enemies. "We do good fight today, yes." The ripper gun didn't answer because guns don't talk, but Mogg liked to pretend it hummed happy when he cleaned it just right. He'd cleaned it already this morning, checking each mechanism the way Lecken had taught him with the patient's voice, not the angry voice. Around him, his squad did their own ready-making. Vasquez threw her dice against the wall, making that click-clack sound that meant she was asking the Emperor about luck. She had explained it once, something about numbers and chances and probability, but Mogg just knew that snake eyes meant bad and boxy six meant good. She'd been throwing lots of snake eyes lately, and it made her face go tight in the worried way. Campton sat cross-legged on his bunk, counting ammunition and moving his lips in the silent way that meant he was doing number thinks. He could count higher than anyone Mogg knew, all the way to numbers that didn't have names Mogg could remember. Sorrel checked her medkit, pulling out each bandage and putting it back in the exact same spot, her hands moving quick, slow, quick, slow, like a heartbeat rhythm. She'd been a medicae before the Guard, trained proper in a real hospital with white walls and everything. Quinns was telling Pike another joke, something about a commissar and a grox that made the young trooper laugh nervous-like. Pike always laughed at Quinns's jokes, even when they weren't funny, which Mogg thought was nice kind. Donna knelt in the corner, praying with his eyes closed, his lips moving in the proper prayer shapes that made the words go up to the golden throne better. And Lecken watched them all with his boss eyes, the ones that could see everything wrong before it happened, the ones that had kept them alive through 2 campaigns already. These were Mogg's friends, his squad. His job was to stand in front when the shooting started and make sure the hurt stayed away from them. It was good work, simple work, the kind of work that made sense in Mogg's head without all the complicated thinking that made his brain feel too full, and moving faster than thinking could follow. One moment Mogg was standing, checking Meat Chunks' sights one more time. The next he was flying sideways, the world going all spinny and wrong like that time. He'd drunk the stuff Quinns said wasn't for Ogryns, but Mogg had tried anyway. He heard the terrible sound of metal screaming, the ship's hull tearing open. It was not a good sound. The air started rushing out, making the sucky sound that meant space was trying to get in where space shouldn't be. Through the spinning and the noise, Mogg saw 3 of his friends tumbling toward the breach, toward the cold black nothing that would make them dead faster than Lars fire. Mogg didn't think, he just moved. He caught Vasquez with one massive arm, feeling her ribs bend under his grip, but not break because he was careful strong. He snagged Pike with the other arm, the boy so light it was like catching a ration pack. Campton managed to grab onto Mogg's equipment belt, his fingers white-knuckled and desperate. The pressure tried to pull them all into the void, but Mogg was Ogryn strong, mining world strong, the kind of strong that could hold a tunnel from collapsing while 30 men escaped. His feet found purchase on a support beam, the metal groaning under the strain but holding. He held on as panels flew past, as loose equipment became missiles, as the emergency klaxons screamed their "This is bad" song. He held on until his muscles felt like they were tearing, until his bones creaked, until the emergency shields finally sparked to life with a crack like thunder. "Everyone sound off." Lecken's voice cut through the klaxons and screaming metal and the ringing in everyone's ears. They all called their names, even Mogg, though it came out more like a grunt because his ribs felt bendy in the wrong ways and his arms were still shaking from the holding. The ship was dying. Even Mogg could tell that from the way it shuddered and groaned, like the great mining machines back home when they ate something too hard and started breaking from the inside. The lights kept going in the blink pattern, and somewhere deep in the ship's guts, something exploded. Sergeant Lecken started barking orders, already leading. "Valkyrie Bay now. Move like you've got a commissar's bolt pistol up your arse." They ran through corridors that kept trying to become walls or ceilings, the ship's death spiral making gravity go all confused and stupid. Up was down, left was right, and twice Mogg had to catch himself on the ceiling that had decided to be the floor for a bit. He kept Pike under one arm when the boy stumbled, carrying him like the sack of tubers Mogg used to haul back home in the mines, back when the biggest worry was making quota, not dying in space. They passed other guardsmen running the wrong way, past servitors still trying to do their work even as sparks flew from their mechanical bits, past a Navy officer standing very still with a piece of metal through his chest, looking surprised about it. They made it to the Valkyrie, not their usual one, the one with the nose art of the Emperor arm wrestling an orc. This one was already half loose from its moorings, the deck crew either dead or run away. Sorrel got it started, her fingers flying over controls she shouldn't know, but did because Sorrel knew all sorts of things that weren't in her job description. Everyone piled in, and Mogg tried to make himself as small as he could, which wasn't very small at all. His head pressed against the ceiling, but he fit mostly. The launch was wrong. Everything was wrong. The Valkyrie tore free from the dying ship just as another explosion rocked the hangar. They shot out into space like a bullet from a gun that didn't want to let go, spinning and tumbling. Through the viewport, Mogg saw the golden remembrance coming apart in big chunks, like a toy some giant child had gotten bored with. He saw other Valkyries and escape pods scattering like seeds from a dead flower. Some made it clear. Some got caught in explosions. Some just stopped, their lights going dark. Then he saw the planet below, an ugly thing, all purple-green and brown like a bruise that got infected and then decided to get worse out of spite. It was getting bigger very fast. "Gravity wells got us," the pilot screamed. He wasn't their usual pilot. Their usual pilot was probably dead or floating in space getting colder. This one had blood on his face, and his hands were shaking. "Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds. This is gonna be rough." Rough was not the right word. Rough was when the truck hit bumps on the mining roads. This was like being inside thunder while the thunder was angry about something. The Valkyrie hit atmosphere and immediately caught fire. They were a comet now, a falling star, the kind that primitives made wishes on not knowing it was just people dying very fast in the sky. The pilot fought the controls, cursing. Through the viewport, Mogg saw the ground coming up fast. Wrong-colored trees that looked like they were made of bones, lakes that glowed sick green, mountains that had too many peaks like fingers reaching up. The first impact wasn't the ground. It was the trees, which were harder than trees should be. The Valkyrie hit them and bounced, actually bounced, like a stone skipping on water. Mogg heard metal tear, heard someone scream, might have been him, heard the engine die with a cough like a sick grox. They hit more trees, these ones breaking but taking chunks of the Valkyrie with them. The left wing came off entirely, just gone, there 1 second and not there the next. They were spinning now, everything a blur of wrong-colored forest and sky that couldn't decide what color it wanted to be. The final impact was almost gentle compared to the rest, like the planet had gotten tired of batting them around and decided to just let them stop. The Valkyrie hit a clearing, slid for what felt like forever, ploughing a furrow in the earth that steamed and hissed, then finally came to rest against a boulder the size of a small hab block. The silence after was almost worse than the noise during. It was the kind of silence that meant things were broken, maybe permanent-like. Mogg woke up to wrongness. Not the spinning wrongness from before, but a deeper wrongness, the kind that made his bones know they weren't supposed to be here. His head hurt with the special kind of hurt that meant something inside was bleeding, but not bleeding out, just bleeding enough to be annoying and make thinking even harder than usual. He sat up, pushing through twisted metal that used to be seats or walls or ceiling. Hard to tell now. His armor had held mostly, though there were new dents that would make the quartermaster make the angry face if they ever saw a quartermaster again. First thing, count fingers. 5 on the left hand, 5 on the right hand, 10 fingers total, all working, all the right shape. Good. Toes would have to wait. His boots were still on, and taking them off seemed like too much work. Besides, toes were bonus fingers, not really necessary for most things. Second thing, count people. This was harder because some people were under things or behind things or making sounds but not moving. 1. That was Lecken, standing, but doing the thing with his face that meant hurt but not saying. His left arm hung wrong, like someone had added an extra elbow in the middle where elbows shouldn't be. But he was doing the boss walk, checking on everyone else first, so he'd probably be okay. Lecken was always okay. That was part of being boss. 2. Vasquez, helping Sorrel out from under medical supplies that had fallen everywhere like snow but heavier and less cold. Vasquez had blood on her forehead but was moving normal-like, so it was probably the okay kind of bleeding, not the bad kind. 3 and 4. Sorrel checking Campton's head, where blood made his hair all sticky and red instead of black. She had her serious medicine face on, the one that meant, stop talking, let me work. Campton's eyes were open, but doing the confused blink that meant his thinking was knocked loose. 5. Quinn's, laughing at something, but the laugh sounded broken, like a voxcaster with water in it. He was holding his ribs with one hand, and there was red between his fingers, but he was still making jokes, so that was good. Quinn's always made jokes. It was his job, like Mogg's job was being strong. 6. Pike, curled up in a corner and shaking but breathing. The shaking was the scared kind, not the hurt kind. Mogg knew the difference because he'd seen both lots of times. 7. Donna, praying over someone, his voice doing the proper Emperor words even though his hands were shaking. 8. The someone was the pilot, but the pilot's head was turned too far around, like someone had tried to see what was behind him but forgot to stop turning. His eyes were looking at things that weren't there anymore, so he didn't count anymore. Dead people didn't count in the people count, only in the remember count. 10. Wait, no. Mogg counted again, using his fingers to keep track. 8 living plus Mogg made 9. 9 was not the right number. They started with more than 9. There should be. Thinking about the missing ones made his head hurt worse, and there were other things to worry about now. The dead would be dead later too. They were patient like that. Mogg, you beautiful bastard. Quinn's wheezed, still trying to smile even though smiling made him leak more red. Thought we lost you there. Mogg is hard to lose, Mogg replied, because it was true. He was big. Big things were easy to find. It was one of the good things about being big, along with reaching high shelves and people getting out of your way in corridors. Lecken walked over, definitely doing the hurt walk, the one where each step was careful like the floor might break. Sound off, trooper. What's working, what's not? Mogg thought about it carefully, doing a check like Lecken had taught him. Start at the top, work down. Head works mostly, makes thinking but not good thinking. Eyes work, can see color. Arms work. He flexed them to be sure. Legs work. He stood up, only banging his head on the ceiling twice. Meat chunks. He looked around and found his weapon, somehow still strapped to his kit, though the strap was twisted all wrong and cutting into his shoulder. Meat chunks is here and not broken. Teeth work. He clacked his iron teeth together, the metal ones that replaced the real ones after that fight with the orc knob. Mogg is ready for work. Good enough, Lecken said, then raised his voice to the boss volume that meant everyone listen now. Listen up, what's left of us. This rock is category extremis, a death world for those who slept through briefing. He gave Pike a look, but not a mean look, just a you should have paid attention look. Everything here wants us dead. The air, the water, the plants, the animals, probably the bloody dirt too. We've all sucked down enough combat drugs to know what hostile means. But this is beyond hostile. This place is actively malevolent. Through the torn hull of the Valkyrie, Mogg could see what Lecken meant. The sun, or whatever the glowing thing in the sky was setting, and it set wrong. The shadows it made seemed too long, reaching like fingers toward the Valkyrie. The trees weren't right either. They were trees in the way a child's drawing was a person. All the right parts, but put together by someone who didn't understand how they were supposed to work. We fought up here tonight, Lecken continued, his good hand pointing at tactical spots while his broken arm just hung there like it was embarrassed. Salvage what we can. Inventory everything. Ammunition, food, medical supplies. Assume we're here long term. Tomorrow at first light, we move toward. He pulled out his data slate, frowned at the cracked screen that kept showing different information every time it flickered, toward the nearest Imperial beacon. Could be a settlement, could be automated, could be 3 years dead. Either way, it's our best shot. The beacon is. He tapped the slate, cursed when it shocked him, tapped it again, approximately 135 kilometers northeast, through what looks like. Another tap, another curse, forest, swamp, and something the geographic scanner is just calling anomaly, which is never good. 135 kilometers, Campton said slowly, like he was tasting the words to make sure they were real. On a death world, with limited supplies. Would you prefer to stay here and see what comes to investigate the crash? Lecken asked, but his voice had the tired sound, not the angry sound. Campton shook his head, then winced because shaking made his brain rattle. Perimeter, Lecken ordered. 2-hour watches, overlapping fields of fire. Mogg, you're our wall, nothing gets past you. Mogg nodded and took position at the biggest breach in the hull, where the metal was torn and the wrong-colored outside could look in. This was good work, simple work. Stand here, shoot things that shouldn't be here. He could do that. He'd been doing that for years now, ever since the nice recruiter told him the guard needed big, strong boys to protect the Emperor. The recruiter hadn't mentioned the dying part, but that was okay. Everybody died. The trick was making sure the right people died at the right time, and the wrong people died before that. The first night they came. Mogg heard them before he saw them, laughing. But not people laughing, not even the bad kind of people laughing when someone fell down or got hurt. This was like nothing he had heard before. A manic symphony of yipping shrieks and guttural whoops. It echoed through the trees, bouncing off trunks and coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Mogg squinted into the purple dark, trying to count eyes like Campton had taught him. Too many eyes to count. Contact, he rumbled, low and steady like Lecken taught. Don't shout, don't panic, just inform. Even Mogg could do that. Everyone went to fighting positions, Lars guns humming to life. The pilot's stub pistol in Pike's shaking hands because the boy's Lars gun had bent in the crash and wouldn't shoot straight anymore. The mor-tiss jackal stepped into the green moonlight, and Mogg stared confused. Its mouth was wrong, split 4 ways like a flower made of teeth, each petal lined with fangs that went all the way back into its throat. When it laughed, all 4 parts moved different, making the sound come from everywhere at once like the world itself thought something was funny. It was dog-shaped, but wrong dog. It laughed again, and more came. 5, 10. Mogg lost count and just called it many in his head. They circled the Valkyrie, testing, probing where the people were, where the weak spots were. One got too close, its tongues. It had 3. Why did it have 3? Tasting the air near the breach. Mogg fired. Meat Chunks roared its angry song, the sound so much better than the laughing. The mor-tiss jackal turned into wet chunks that splattered against the trees. The others laughed harder, like this was the best joke, like their packmate exploding was the punchline they'd been waiting for. Then they melted back into the darkness, still laughing. They're testing us, Campton said quietly, his voice doing the smart person worried thing. Lecken nodded. Intelligent pack hunters. Perfect. The way he said perfect meant it was actually the opposite of perfect, meant it was the worst possible thing, meant they were in the deep grok's dung that even shovels couldn't help with. The next morning brought new wrongness. The sun came up purple, which made everything look like bruises, even things that weren't bruised yet. Sorrel tried to purify water from a stream that ran near the crash site, but it ate through 3 filters before she gave up. Quinns found what looked like fruit on a tree that wasn't sweating for once, but when he cut it open, it screamed. Not just made a sound like air escaping, actually screamed like it had vocal cords and pain receptors and the capacity for suffering. He dropped it, and it kept screaming until Vasquez shot it with her last pistol. The moss that grew on everything glowed at night, which would have been helpful except the glow attracted things, and the spores it released made everyone, except Mogg, cough blood. Mogg didn't understand why his friends got sick from the yellow moss. It tasted bad, like licking a Medicaid cabinet, but it didn't hurt him none. When he mentioned this to Sorrel, she got the interested face that meant she wanted to do science but couldn't. Ogryn physiology, she explained while dabbing blood from her own nose. You're adapted for toxic environments. Mining worlds, industrial worlds, places where normal humans need environment suits just to survive. Your liver is the size of my head, your kidneys could filter promethium, and your bones store enough calcium to rebuild themselves 3 times over. The rest of us. She gestured at the squad, all of them looking pale and sick except for Mogg. We're dying just breathing this air. Slowly, but dying. Days blended together in a haze of purple sunrises and green sunsets. They tried to move toward the beacon, but every path led through worse things. Acid swamps and fungal forests, where the spores were so thick they blotted out the sun, making noon as dark as midnight. And always the mor-tiss jackals followed, laughing. They'd learned the squad's patterns now, knew who was weakest, who was strongest. Pike broke first, not his body, his thinking parts. The young soldier started crying at night, quiet-like so he thought no one noticed. But Mogg noticed. Mogg always noticed when his friends were hurt, even the inside hurt that didn't bleed where you could see it. He didn't know the right words to make it better. Words were hard and feelings were harder. So he just sat next to the young soldier and hummed the mining songs from home. They weren't good songs, but they were steady songs, the kind you could dig to for hours without thinking about the weight of rock above your head. My ma had a voice like that, Pike whispered one night when the jackals were being extra loud with their laughing, all rumbly and warm. She sang when she worked the hydroponics, grew tomatoes the size of your fist, she did. Real ones, not the corpse starch kind. Mogg's ma sang too, Mogg said, though remembering her made his chest hurt in the feelings place that armor couldn't protect. Sang about deep dark and finding light. Sang about the Emperor watching even where the sun don't go. Good songs for being not scared. I'm scared all the time, Pike admitted, his young voice cracking. He was 18, barely old enough to hold a Lars gun proper. Every sound makes me jump. Every shadow might have teeth. I can't stop shaking. Is okay, Mogg said, putting one massive hand on the boy's shoulder, gentle-like so he didn't break nothing. Scared means careful. Careful means alive. Mogg's scared too, just too stupid to show it right. Pike laughed, but it was a wet laugh, the kind with tears mixed in. You're not stupid, Mogg. Mogg thought about this for a long time. The spore storm came without warning the next day. One moment, the air was just its normal purple-tasting wrongness that made everyone's nose bleed a little. The next it was thick as soup, with glowing yellow clouds that moved like they were alive, like they were hunting. Visibility dropped to arm's length, then less than arm's length. Then Mogg couldn't even see his own hand held out in front of him. The world disappeared into poison light that made his eyes water and his throat burn. Stay together, Lecken shouted, but his voice sounded wrong, muffled and echoing at the same time. Hold on to something, don't get separated. Mogg grabbed the nearest person, Quinns, and held on tight. Through his glove, he could feel Quinns's shoulder, solid and real in a world gone yellow and wrong. Can't see nothing, Quinns shouted, though he was right next to Mogg. Something moved in the yellow. Mogg saw shapes that might have been limbs or might have been something worse. Then something yanked Quinns away. Not pushed, not pulled. Yanked, like he was attached to a cable that suddenly went taut. Mogg tried to hold on, dug his feet into the ground that was already turning to mud from the spore moisture. But his hands were slippery with the film the spores created when they touched skin, and Quinns was ripped from his grasp so fast Mogg heard his shoulder dislocate. Quinns, Mogg roared, charging in the direction his friend had gone. The spores got thicker, so thick he had to push through them like walking through water. He found blood, scattered last shots, scoring the trees in wild patterns like someone had been firing blind. He found Quincy's boot, just the one, still laced up proper. Then he heard it, laughter mixed with screaming. That horrible four-way laughter. The screaming went on for 4 seconds, Mogg counted. He couldn't help it. Then stopped sudden-like, cut off mid-sound. But the laughter continued, got louder, got more. When the storm cleared an hour later, they found pieces. Not enough pieces, just enough to know Quinns wasn't coming back. His tags, somehow untouched. Half his Lars gun, chewed up, the metal edges dissolved like something had tried to digest it. One boot with the foot still in it, but Mogg didn't look at that too close, because looking made the feelings place hurt too much. Donna said the prayers while Mogg dug a grave with his bare hands, the acid soil burning through his gloves and into his skin, but not enough to matter. Pain on the outside was easier than pain on the inside. They buried what they could find, and Vasquez scratched Quincy's name on a rock with her knife, making the letters deep so they'd last a while. That night the jackals laughed all around them, letting them know they were still there. It made Mogg's trigger finger itch and his iron teeth grind together. "Don't listen," Sorrel said, but her voice was shaking. "It's just sound. Just vibrations in the air. It doesn't mean anything." But it did mean something. It meant the jackals understood. They were smart in the bad way, the way that meant they knew exactly what they were doing. Vasquez got hurt the next day, during a river crossing that went wrong in every possible way. The water was only waist-deep on Mogg, but that meant chest-deep on everyone else, and the current was strong and wrong, pulling sideways as much as forward. Something in the water, they never saw what, hit her from below, lifted her up and slammed her back down. Mogg heard the crack even over the rushing water, saw the way her face went white. He carried her to the far bank, gentle as he could, but she screamed anyway. Sorrel did her medicine checking, her face getting tighter and tighter as she pressed on Vasquez's stomach. "Internal bleeding," she said quiet-like, so only Lecken and Mogg could hear. "Liver's lacerated, maybe spleen too, I can't. Without a proper Medicaid facility." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. They all knew what not finishing meant. They made camp right there because moving Vasquez would just make her die faster. Sorrel gave her the last of the good pain meds, the ones they'd been saving for whoever got it worst. Mogg sat with her while she faded, holding her hand gentle-like so he didn't break her fingers, which felt like bird bones in his massive grip. "Iron Teeth," she wheezed, using the name the others called him when they wanted him to feel included in the joke, when they wanted him to know he was one of them even though he was different. "Want to learn something?" "Yes," Mogg said, because learning from friends was always good, especially learning from friends who were going away soon. Counting past 10. "You got 10 fingers right," Mogg nodded, holding up both hands to show her, though it meant letting go of her hand for a moment. "Each finger is 1. But your whole hand, that's 5. 2 hands is 10. Now your toes. You got toes in those big boots." 10 toes, Mogg confirmed. "Checked this morning, all still attached." She laughed, then coughed, and there was red in the cough. "Good, so fingers are 10, toes are another 10. That's 20. 2 10s make 20. Can you remember that?" 20, Mogg repeated, counting on his fingers and imagining his toes. 2 10s, fingers and toes, 20. "Good, now if you need to count more you start over. 21, 22. Just like 1, 2, but with 20 in front." She taught him, patient-like even though talking made her cough red and breathing made her face go tight with hurt. She taught him 20, 30, 40, all the way to 100, though by the time she got there, her voice was just whispers and Mogg had to lean close to hear. She made him repeat it back, made him count jackals they'd seen, ammunition they had left. "Good," she whispered. "So good, Mogg. You're smarter than you know." By the time the sun set purple-green, she stopped moving forever. Her dice were still in her hand, showing 7, not good, not bad, just middle, just normal, just done. Mogg closed her eyes gentle-like, the way he'd seen Sorrel do for others, and added her dice to his pocket next to the Emperor's picked. They clicked against each other like they were talking, like Vasquez was still making jokes about odds and probability, and the Emperor's own luck running out. They buried her next to a tree that almost looked normal. Donna said the long prayers, the ones for guardsmen who died holding the line, even when the line was just surviving another day. Pike cried openly now, not caring who saw. Campton taught Mogg to make a marker with scratches that showed her name and rank, and the day she died, using the Imperial calendar that Mogg didn't understand, but copied exactly, because exactness mattered for the dead. Campton lasted another few days before the fungus got him proper. It started as purple veins under his skin, just little ones at first, like someone had drawn on him with a purple pen. But they spread, got thicker, started pushing up under the skin like roots looking for soil. He kept teaching even as it spread up his neck, across his jaw, reaching for his eyes like fingers. He taught Mogg how to track days with scratches on his armor, how to tell direction by the way the wrong sun moved, how to remember names by making them into songs. The Remember song, Campton wheezed through lips gone violet with infection, his breath smelling like mushrooms and death. So you don't forget us when we're gone. Mogg never forget, Mogg promised, but Campton shook his head. You will. Time makes everyone forget, even Ogryns, so we make a song. Songs stick in the head even when everything else falls out. Sing it back to me. Mogg thought hard, putting the names in order, making them fit a rhythm like the mining songs. He sang in his rumble voice that sounded like rocks grinding. Lecken boss, strong and think. Vasquez dice, lucky clink. Sorrel medicine, stop the hurt. Campton teacher, counting expert. Quinn's jokes make laugh time. Donna prayer, emperor rhyme. Pike young, brave small fighter. Mogg remembers, holds them tighter. Campton smiled, and purple liquid ran from the corner of his mouth. Good, that's good, perfect, even. He stood up, checking his las gun one last time, making sure the power pack was full. I'm going for a walk. Campton shouldn't walk alone. Dangerous. Jackals out there. I know. Campton patted Mogg's massive arm, his hand so small against Mogg's bicep. That's the point, big guy. I won't let those things get me like they got Quinn's. Count to 20. You can do that now, then you'll hear it. Just one shot. Clean. Mogg counted to 20 on his fingers and toes like Vasquez taught him. At 20, he heard the single Lars crack in the distance, sharp and final. He added Campton's teaching stylus to his pocket, next to the dice and the picked. His pockets were getting full of dead friends' things, and they were getting empty of living friends to protect. Lecken's head hurt got worse after that. The thing that was bleeding inside started bleeding more, or maybe in new places. Sometimes he forgot where they were, called Mogg by the wrong name, Marcus, which Sorrel said quiet like. He was Lecken's son who died. The sergeant would snap back to himself, embarrassed and angry, but the confused times got longer and the clear times got shorter. During the confused times, he'd talk to people who weren't there, give orders to squads that had died years ago. During one clear time, when his eyes were focused and his voice was steady, he taught Mogg tactics using little rocks and scratches in the dirt. See, Mogg, enemy comes from here. He placed a black rock. You go here. He moved a white rock. Make them narrow, funnel them. Can't surround if they can't spread. Use the terrain. Like mining tunnel, Mogg said, understanding. Make them come small group, not big group. Then Mogg can smash 1, 2, 3, not all at once. Exactly, Lecken smiled, and it was a real smile, not a sergeant smile, not a make the troops feel better smile, but an actual proud smile. You understand more than you think you do, Mogg. You'd have made a good sergeant in another life. Mogg too stupid for sergeant, Mogg said, but Lecken shook his head. Different kinds of smart trooper. You've got the kind that matters when Lars bolts are flying, the kind that keeps people alive. But Mogg hadn't kept people alive. Quinn's was dead. Vasquez was dead. Campton was dead. Soon Lecken would be dead too. Mogg could see it in the way he held his head, like his skull was too full and might crack. Another attack happened that night, and it wasn't a probe this time. Not testing, not playing. The jackals came to kill. Dozens of them, maybe more. Mogg tried to count, but they kept moving, kept laughing. They came from all sides, leaping great distances like gravity was on their side, twisting and squeezing through gaps that seemed too small. Mogg held the main breach because that was his job. Meat Chunks sang its song until it ran dry, then he used it as a club until it broke. Then he used his combat blade, really just a sharpened piece of hull metal, but it worked for making holes in things that shouldn't have holes. The jackals came in waves, laughing, always laughing, even when they died. Behind him, he heard Lecken roar orders that made sense and orders that didn't. Heard Lars Fire going wild, disciplined, wild again. Heard Pike's frightened but determined war cry, the boy trying so hard to be brave. Then he heard Lecken scream, "Look out!" to someone, heard the wet sound of tearing that meant teeth in meat, and when he could finally look back, the sergeant was down, his throat was gone. Just gone, everything from jaw to chest opened up. But Donna was alive because of it. Lecken had pushed him aside, taken the bite meant for the preacher. Lecken's eyes found Mogg's, and even though he couldn't talk with no throat, his hand moved, pointed at Mogg, then at the others. Then made the sign of the Aquila, though he only got halfway through before his hand fell and his eyes went somewhere else, somewhere past the horizon. The message was clear anyway. You're in charge now. Protect them, hold the line. Mogg nodded once, then turned back to the breach as more jackals poured through. He was boss now. Boss Mogg. The idea was too big for his head, but he'd figure it out later if there was a later. The jackals pulled back eventually, but they took Donna with them. Dragged him into the dark while he was still praying, the words of the litany of protection getting fainter and fainter until they stopped. Pike tried to save him, overcharged his Lars gun for one big shot, the kind that could punch through armor if you did it right. But he didn't do it right. Too scared, too hurried, too young to know the trick of it. The power pack exploded instead in a shower of spark and superheated gas. Mogg dropped his blade and ran to Pike. The boy's arms were cooked meat from fingertips to elbows, the skin black and red and white in all the wrong places. His face was a mess of burns, one eye sealed shut, maybe forever. He was making sounds, but not word sounds, just hurt sounds, the kind that came from so deep inside that language couldn't reach, picking him up gentle as he could, which wasn't gentle enough because Pike screamed anyway. Mogg fix. Sorrel will. But Sorrel was on the ground too, not moving, a jackal's bite through her middle that showed things that should be inside being outside. Her medkit was scattered, the supplies she'd guarded so careful spread across the blood mud like offerings to the wrong-colored sky. Just him and Pike now. Just two, and one of them was dying. Mogg did what he could. Found burn gel in the scattered supplies, spread it on Pike's arms with fingers too big for delicate work. Wrapped them in the cleanest cloth he could find, which wasn't very clean. Made the boy drink water even though swallowing made him cry. The jackals would be back. So Mogg picked up what he could carry, meat chunks even though it was broken, because maybe he could fix it. Some last packs even though Pike's gun was slag. Food that might not be poisoned. Water that was definitely poisoned, but less poisoned than the rest. Sorrel's med supplies that he didn't know how to use but maybe would figure out. And Pike, carried gentle-like against his chest, where the boy could hear Mogg's heart beating, strong and steady like the drums in the Imperial hymns. He walked through the night, because staying still meant dying. Mogg walked through acid swamps that started dissolving his boots after a while. His thick Ogryn skin could take it, mostly. Through fungal fields that made his nose bleed purple and his thoughts go fuzzy. But he kept walking because walking was simple, and simple was what Mogg did best. Pike was delirious, talking about his home, about grass that was green normal, not green wrong. "When I get back," Pike mumbled against Mogg's chest, his voice thick with pain and poison. "Gonna plant potatoes. Rows and rows. You can help. You're strong, good for digging." "Mogg good at digging," Mogg agreed, even though he knew Pike wouldn't be planting anything. The boy's breathing was getting worse, wet and rattling like something inside had come loose. "Count for me," Pike asked. "Count high as you can, like Vasquez taught you." So Mogg counted. 20 on fingers and toes. Then 20 again, that was 40, Vasquez had taught him. And again, 60. Pike told him, between fevered rambles about green grass and blue sky and his mother's voice, that 10 tens was something called 100. Such a big number Mogg's head hurt thinking about it, but he kept counting because Pike asked, and doing what friends asked was important. 73, Mogg said, still walking, always walking. "Good," Pike whispered. "Keep going." 74, 75. My ma would like you, Pike said, words slurring. She likes people who try. Doesn't matter if they're smart or strong or pretty, just matters that they try. 76, 77. You try so hard, Mogg. Try to protect everyone. Try to understand. Try to be good. 78, 79. But you can't protect everyone. Pike's remaining eye looked up at him, surprisingly clear for a moment. Not your fault, just how it is. Some people die, but you tried. That's what counts. 80. Mogg kept counting. By 90, Pike's breathing had gotten quieter. By 95, it was just whispers of air. At 100, Pike smiled. Good job, Iron Teeth. You learned so good. He stared at Mogg for a few seconds, then went quiet forever in Mogg's arms as he reached 100, that impossible number that meant all his fingers and all his toes 5 times over. Mogg kept walking because stopping would mean accepting that everyone was gone, and his brain wasn't ready for that kind of hurt. He walked until he found a place that wasn't too wrong, where the dirt was almost normal-colored. It was a clearing, maybe made by something big that had died here, or maybe just a place where even wrong life didn't want to grow. He dug Pike's grave and covered it with rocks, hoping to keep the jackals from disturbing the body. Exhausted by the work, he collapsed nearby to rest. Then he sat by the grave and talked to his friends who were no longer with him. Told Lecken about being Mogg boss, even though he didn't know how. Told Vasquez her dice were safe, showed her the numbers. Got snake eyes twice, boxcars once, and 7 a lot, always 7. Told Campton he remembered the song, sang it 3 times to make sure it stuck. Told Quinns the joke about the commissar and the groks, even though he still didn't understand why it was funny. Something about the groks being smarter. Told Sorrel he was keeping track of his wounds. The cuts and bruises, 3 broken ribs, 2 dislocated fingers he'd popped back in himself, and something wrong inside that made him cough red sometimes. Told Donna the prayers, all mixed up but with a right feeling. Told Pike about the 100, about all the numbers between here and there, about trying and failing and trying anyway. He stayed there for a while, unable to find the strength to get moving again. Then he heard something that wasn't laughing. It was crying. Tiny, frightened crying, like a baby animal but sadder, like something so small and scared it didn't even know what it was scared of, just that the world was wrong and it was alone. Mogg stood up, joints protesting, dried blood cracking on his skin like old paint. He followed the sound through purple ferns that left welts on his skin, through trees that wept acid, through air that tasted like batteries and death. The crying got louder, more desperate. He found the place where the ground was all churned up and painted with blood. The crying came from a hollow tree, the kind that was mostly dead but too stubborn to fall down. The bark was scored with claw marks, bite marks, like something had tried to dig out what was inside, but got interrupted. Mogg pulled away the bark careful-like, his thick skin better suited for it than human hands would have been. Inside the hollow, he found it. It was small. So small he could hold it in one palm with room left over. Covered in fur that was silver-grey like moon on water, if moon and water were things that existed proper on this world. It had ears too big for its head, making it look like it might fall over from the weight of them. Eyes that took up most of its face, blue-green like terror was supposed to be in the old stories, before it became the throne world, when it still had oceans. Those eyes were looking at him with the kind of fear that was past being afraid, the kind that had given up on expecting anything but more hurt. It looked almost like a Felid, but wrong. Not wrong like the jackals were wrong, not twisted and evil and laughing. Wrong like it didn't belong here any more than Mogg did. Like something from a normal world had gotten lost and ended up in this place where nothing was normal. Its fur had patterns that shifted when it moved, like camouflage that couldn't decide what to match. Little paws with too many toes, 6 on each foot, maybe 7 on the back left. A tail that was too long and had a tuft at the end like a paintbrush. "Oh," Mogg said, his voice soft as he could make it, which was still like gravel in a drum. "You're all alone too." The creature, the little fuzzy thing, made the saddest sound Mogg had ever heard. Sadder than Pike dying. Sadder than Lecken calling him Marcus. It was the sound of something that had never known anything but fear and hunger and didn't even have the words to ask for help. It was hurt, scratches on its tiny body that were big for something so small. One ear was torn, hanging at the wrong angle. There was dried blood matted in its fur. Mogg could see the jackal bite marks on the tree where they'd tried to dig it out before something bigger and meaner had come along. Maybe its parent, maybe its pack, but they were gone now, their blood painting the ground, and this small thing was all that was left. Little Fuzzy, Mogg decided, because naming things made them real, made them matter. That's you. Little Fuzzy, the creature mewed, not quite a meow, not quite a whimper, something in between. It tried to crawl deeper into the tree, but there was nowhere to go. Just solid wood and no escape, and an Ogryn's massive hand blocking the only exit. Is okay, Mogg rumbled in his softest voice. Mogg is friend shape, not eat shape. See. He held up his other hand, showing it was empty, no weapons, no threats. Just Mogg. Just tired Mogg who doesn't want to be alone no more. He dug in his pack with his free hand, found his last real ration bar. His stomach had been hurting for days, the kind of hurt that meant no food too long, but little Fuzzy's stomach was smaller and probably hurt worse. Carefully, gentle-like, he broke off a piece so small it was barely a crumb for his big fingers. Food, he said, holding it out on one massive finger. Good food, not poison food, not trick food. Real food. Little Fuzzy sniffed, its tiny nose twitching. Then, so fast Mogg almost missed it, a tiny pink tongue darted out and took the crumb. The creature chewed, swallowed, then looked at him with those huge eyes that seemed to ask. More, Mogg agreed, breaking off another piece, then another. Little Fuzzy ate like it hadn't eaten in days. Probably hadn't. When the ration was gone, all of it, Mogg didn't keep none. Little Fuzzy did something that made Mogg's chest hurt in the good way for the first time since the crash. It purred, not like a Felid exactly, more like a tiny engine that ran on contentment instead of promethium. The sound was broken, stuttering, like it had forgotten how to purr and was remembering as it went. But it was purring, and it was aimed at Mogg, and that meant Mogg had done something right. Good little Fuzzy, Mogg said, and very slowly, very careful, he scooped the creature up in his palm. It weighed nothing, like holding warm air that happened to have fur. It curled up in a ball, tail wrapped around itself with that paintbrush tip covering its nose, and kept purring. The jackals found them later that night. They were camped in the ruins of something that might have been a building once, or maybe it was just rocks that looked like they meant something. Little Fuzzy's ears went flat against its head, and it made a scared noise that was part hiss, part whine, part something else that didn't have a name. Is okay, Mogg lied, because sometimes lies were kindness. Mogg is big strong. Keep little Fuzzy safe. But keeping safe was harder now. He couldn't fight proper while holding something so small and fragile. Couldn't run fast with no food in his belly for, he'd lost count. But thinking about food made his stomach hurt worse. He sang the Remember song to keep little Fuzzy calm, the rumble of his voice seeming to soothe the creature even though it couldn't understand the words. Lecken boss, strong and think. Vasquez dice, lucky clink. Sorrel medicine, stop the hurt. Campton teacher, counting expert. Quinn's jokes make laugh time. Donna prayer, emperor rhyme. Pike young, brave small fighter. Mogg remembers, holds them tighter. He stayed awake all night, waiting for the attack that never happened. They kept moving toward where the sun rose, because Mogg had decided that was where the Emperor lived, in the sunrise place where the light came from first. It was probably wrong, but it was a direction, and directions mattered when you were lost. Each step was harder. His feet, tough as they were, had been eaten down to meet by the acid ground. Every step left bloody prints that steamed in the wrong air. His hands were more scar than skin from pushing through thorn plants and acid trees. The fungal infections that killed Campton were starting in him too, purple veins spreading under his skin, but slower because Ogryn were tough. Because Ogryn were made to survive where humans couldn't. Because maybe the Emperor knew stupid people needed extra protection. Story, little Fuzzy would ask in its way, a specific chirp that meant it wanted to hear Mogg's voice. Not because it understood the words, but because the sound meant safe, meant not alone, meant someone cared enough to keep talking. So Mogg told stories. Not good stories, because he wasn't smart like that. Simple stories about his friends. Sometimes when he told the stories, he'd forget they were dead. He'd look around for them, expect Campton to correct his counting or Quinns to add a punchline. Then he'd remember, and the remembering hurt worse than the hunger. The jackals were massing. Mogg could feel it like weather coming, like pressure in his bones that had been broken and healed wrong. They were done playing, done testing, done following and laughing and waiting. They wanted to end this. He could hear them at night, not just a few anymore, but many. More than he could count even with his new numbers. They were calling to each other in their four-way laughs, coordinating, planning. They were smart in the bad way, and they were ready. He looked at little Fuzzy sleeping against his chest, tucked under his armor where it was warm and safe, and made a decision. The kind of decision that came from the deep place, the place where thinking didn't matter, just knowing. He found the ravine the next day. It was like the Emperor had put it there just for him, deep, narrow at the bottom, wide at the top. The walls were steep, almost vertical, made of the kind of rock that even jackals would have trouble climbing quick. There was only one way in proper, a narrow path between two boulder falls. If he was going to die, and he was, that was clear as the purple sky, this was a good dying place. Lecken would be proud he'd remembered about tactics. But little Fuzzy couldn't die here. That wasn't right, wasn't fair. Little Fuzzy hadn't asked to be here, hadn't signed up for the guard, hadn't taken the oath. Little Fuzzy was just small and scared and needed someone to be strong for it. He spent the night preparing, found a hide hole in the rocks, a crack really, barely big enough for little Fuzzy but too small for jackals to reach into, deep enough that even their tongues couldn't get far. He lined it with his jacket. The jacket still smelled like him, like safety, like the big warm thing that had meant food and protection. He put all the food in there. Bark he'd been saving that was almost soft enough for little teeth. 3 berries he'd found that only made you sick, not dead, what passed for water in his canteen. When morning came, purple bright and wrong as always, he held little Fuzzy up to his face, looking at those big blue-green eyes. "Little Fuzzy," he said in his most serious voice, the one he'd used when taking the oath to the Emperor. "Need you to do brave thing, big brave thing." The creature chirped, confused. It had learned that mornings meant travel, meant riding in the warm place against Mogg's chest, meant stories and counting, and sometimes food. Mogg has to do fight work. Big fight. Biggest fight. He showed little Fuzzy the hiding spot. Little Fuzzy stays here, safe here, warm here, food here, water here, wait for Mogg. He put little Fuzzy in the crack, watched it turn around twice, testing the space. It chirped again, the question chirp that meant it didn't understand. "Stay," Mogg said firmly. "Hide, be quiet, be small. No sound, no moving. Jackals come, jackals go, little Fuzzy stays hidden." He started to seal the crack with a rock, leaving just enough space for air and light, but not enough for anything bigger than little Fuzzy to get through. The creature mewed, scared now, understanding that something was different, something was wrong, something was ending. "Mogg come back," he lied, the lie sticking in his throat. "But if Mogg is slow, if Mogg takes too long, little Fuzzy waits for new people. Good people, Emperor people. They come to Sunrise Place eventually, always do." He pulled out all the remembrances, looked at them one more time. The Emperor's picked, so worn it was just shapes and shadows now. Vasquez's dice, still showing 7. Campton's stylus. All the tags from everyone, names etched in metal that would last longer than memory. He tucked them all in the hide hole with little Fuzzy. "Keep these. Remember Mogg. Remember the good warm. Remember the trying." Little Fuzzy mewed once more, soft and sad, and understanding in the way animals understand when something final is happening. Mogg touched its tiny head with one massive finger, gentle as he'd ever been in his life. "Good little Fuzzy, brave little Fuzzy." Then he sealed the crack and walked away before his heart could break all the way, down into the ravine, to the narrow place he'd chosen. He could hear the jackals gathering above, their laughter echoing off the stone walls and multiplying until it sounded like the whole world was laughing. So many, more than any number he knew, all coming for the lone, starving Ogryn who'd been a thorn in their territory for too long, who'd survived when he should have died with his friends. Mogg painted himself for war. Not proper paint, didn't have that. But mud mixed with his own blood, mixed with the purple moss that made everything else sick. Drew the aquila on his chest best he could remember, probably wrong, but the Emperor would understand it was the thought that mattered. Put marks on his face like Lecken had taught, the ones that meant death before dishonor, though they probably looked more like death before dinner, the way Mogg drew them. He stuck his combat blade in the ground where he could reach it quick. Found good throwing rocks, the kind with edges that could crack skulls if you threw them right. Tore strips from his undershirt to wrap his ruined hands so he could grip better, though the cloth immediately soaked through with blood and other things that leaked from infected wounds. Meat chunks was beyond repair, but he held it anyway because it felt right to die with a weapon in his hands, even a broken one. Then he stood in the narrow place and waited. They came with the setting sun, their wrong bodies casting wrong shadows. Laughing, always laughing, but now with anticipation, with hunger, with the joy of something that had been patient and was about to be rewarded. The first wave came almost casual-like they were just checking if he was really going to fight or if he'd just lie down and make it easy. 3 jackals charged, testing him. Mogg grabbed the first one's laughing mouth, got all 4 parts of it in his massive hands, and tore it wider until the laugh became a scream, then a gurgle, then nothing. Used its body to beat the second one to death, swinging it like a club until bones broke and organs ruptured. The third got his blade through its eyes, all of them at once, the blade punching through its wrong-shaped skull. More came. So many more. Mogg fought like his name, like something that couldn't be broken, only worn down. Like the mountains on his home world that the mining machines chewed at for centuries without ever really defeating. He used every trick, every lesson learned from dead friends. When his blade broke, he used rocks. When the rocks ran out, he used his fists. When his fists broke, knuckles shattering against jackal skulls that were harder than they looked, he used his iron teeth, biting throats and anything that got close enough. The ravine became slippery with blood, most of it jackal blood, but plenty of it was Ogryn blood too. His left arm stopped working when one of them bit through the tendons, the limb hanging useless and wrong like Lecken's had. He kept fighting one-handed, using the dead arm as a shield, letting them bite it since he couldn't feel it anyway. His legs gave out when they hamstrung him, tendons snapping like cables under too much tension. He fought from his knees, still swinging, still biting. When he couldn't kneel anymore, when his body just wouldn't hold him up, he fought lying down, pulling them close with his good hand and tearing with his teeth, those iron teeth that had given him his name, that were the last thing about him that wouldn't break. The numbers were impossible, beyond counting, beyond comprehension. But every second he fought was a second farther away little Fuzzy stayed safe. Every jackal that died here was one that wouldn't go looking for small scared things hidden in rocks. That was the math that mattered. Not how many he killed, but how long he could keep killing. As darkness came, real darkness, not just his eyes failing, Mogg saw something through the press of bodies, up in the rocks. A tiny face peering out through the crack he'd sealed. Little Fuzzy was watching. Had unsealed the hiding place somehow, those clever little paws with too many toes finding a way. Was seeing him die, would remember this. That was okay. Maybe even good. Little Fuzzy would know what trying looked like. Would know that some things were worth dying for. Would know that even stupid, simple Ogryns could be brave when brave was all that was left. Emperor protects, Mogg whispered through the blood, though it came out more of a gurgle. The jackals closed in for the final time, their laughter reaching a crescendo, and Mogg kept fighting until he couldn't, kept trying until trying ended, and there was just darkness, and the distant sound of something small and frightened mewing.